Hello and welcome to Joshua Space, a podcast all about books. On today's episode, I have the wonderful privilege of interviewing Herman Streunagel. So let's go ahead and tune in to that right now. Do you want to tell everyone what Eclipse is about?
Yeah, sure. So the premise of Eclipse, it's hard to talk too much about it without getting into spoilers right away because things start to happen pretty quick. But I mean, the premise is that, a few hundred years from now, climate change has kind of ravaged the earth. And what in order to basically there were climate wars, the population was devastated, and essentially humanity had to flee the planet in order to ensure that it could be restored. Um, what kind of some of the characters find out. It's not too much of a spoiler because it happens pretty much right away. Um, but there were the elites basically stayed behind on Earth and kicked the rest of us out to kind of mine the resources of the solar system to send back to them. So it's kind of a reverse play on the billionaires in space kind of trope, but that's the premise. So it follows two main characters, 2 points of view. One is a farmer on the space station Eclipse. His name is Django, and he basically discovers that they've been lied to the entire time, and has to deal with some of the fallout of that. And the second character is Mika. She's a former space pirate. She lives outside the space station, and when we meet her, she's kind of chartering goods to and from the moon, essentially to other ports in the system.
Nice. So what made you decide, because it is in two point of views, you kind of have
Yes.
two different storylines kind of coinciding. Did you come up with one of the storylines first or both of them at the same time and decide right off the bat that you wanted to tell both stories?
Yeah. Eclipse was an interesting. The way it kind of came about was interesting. It kind of came out really organically and really quickly, to be honest. So they did kind of generate at the same time. Initially what I wanted, the book came out of a short story that I'd written called Infinity, which is available on my website. But that that one took place entirely on the space station, and I wanted to offer something a little bit different from just the short story. Um, and also, the typical dystopian trope is, the hidden world outside of, their own. I wanted to kind of give a point of view outside of that as well, and give a sense of what the wider universe looks like right away. And Mika's character kind of came pretty naturally and pretty quickly. So
Nice. Do you have a favorite on which perspective you enjoy writing about more?
um Mika's a lot more fun, especially, in the first book. She's a little bit more of a badass than Django. Django's, trying to find his way a little bit more.
Yeah.
So Mika is a little bit more, there's a little bit more action in it, at least at the beginning. So that definitely makes it a little bit more fun. They definitely both have their roles in the universe to tell. So I do enjoy both characters, but yeah, Mika, there's a little bit more going on with her.
Yeah, that's true. I do appreciate the fact because it's still in one aspect it's very much a dystopian story, but you also get the space opera vibe and kind of like an adventure of you're getting to see what is going on around the galaxy and kind of see all the different dynamics at play and how everyone's interacting with each other. And then you go to Django, who is on the space station and just thinks that that's all it is. It's just the space
Right.
station. There's no one outside of it. And so it's very interesting to see how you can have an entire galaxy full of different space stations and people and ships and pirates and all these things going on. And they're able to confine a whole civilization into a spaceship and say, hey, we're all that's left of humanity. Everyone else is gone. We're trying to revive the Earth, basically. I think
Right.
it's very fascinating.
Yeah, I've definitely had a lot of fun with this universe and playing with perspective. And that's, really what I wanted to work with, in this novel and the series is, people's perspective of the world, right? And, we can really be narrow-minded in our little corner of the world, no matter what
Oh
corner
yeah.
that may be, right? So definitely wanted to play with that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things I really got from the book while reading is it's very much about seeing outside of our own scope. And sometimes we kind of get tunnel vision and we want to believe what we're told. And
Yeah.
it's, I think one of the underlying things that I picked up on was very much, if you are slapped in the face with the truth, are you going to believe what is right in front of you and being told to you, or are you going to believe your entire life and what you've been
Yeah.
dealing with? And how much, when you can see the truth in front of you, are you willing to believe it and recognize that, hey, what I'm seeing is real and everything else is incorrect? Or are you going to still try and hide behind, no, I'm just going to believe what I want to believe, I don't want to deal with this, and kind of go back into the background?
Absolutely, yeah, and I'm glad you picked up on that, because I saw that, in the review you had posted, and I was like, that's, I was happy about that, because that definitely was, a major theme of what I wanted to explore with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So with, because I know you're currently writing book two
Yeah,
and it's going just a little bit over.
yeah, just a little bit.
The original goal word count was 100,000 words, right?
Yeah.
What are you at currently?
As of this morning, it's 123,000
Okay.
words. Yeah, it's, and Eclipse was about 75,000 words. So I mean, Eclipse is 300 pages. So I was aiming for about 400 pages with the second one. Where it's gonna be at least 150,000 words. There's so much going on. I have a set endpoint in mind, and people have asked me, well, why don't you just split it into two? I'm like, well, it's not a complete story then. I really want to deliver a complete story. Like with Eclipse, it does lead into the rest of the series quite nicely, but I really wanted to give you a sense of, like, okay, this story is done at the end. Like what Django and Mika were off to accomplish by the end is complete, and now it's on to the next part of the story, right? Um, so I don't want to split it. It's possible it could end up being 200,000 words, and my editor is not going to be too happy with me, but but we'll see when we get there. I can see the end at the end, but with this, with the second one, I haven't really written it from front to start either. My process with Eclipse, I sat down and wrote Eclipse in 6 weeks, and then I edited it for 3 months. But but it was a very much start at the beginning and write it through. And with this one, there's a little bit more weaves going through the story. So I've kind of had to segregate things a little bit more in the points of views and that sort of thing, just to make sure that the story flowed well from each person's perspective. And so there's going to be a little bit of going back and adding to the stories. So we'll see where it ends up.
So have you become, because you are writing a series and the plans for it to be 4 books, and you already know where book two's ending, have you become more of a planner versus when you first started as a pantser, or is it still kind of a little bit of both?
It's a little bit of both, and I find every book is different. And I really tried with book two to sit down and plan, um, the storyline. And in a way, it helped, but in a way, it also got me stuck. And I kind of got stuck in that stage for about a month. And my brain just doesn't work as a planner, not a complete planner. I like to know, I've known from the start of book two where what's going to happen at the end. I've known the ending. Um, it's just getting there. I can plan a few steps in advance, but after that, the characters really kind of take over and, direct where the story needs to go. Then a lot of times it makes sense, and I've got to backtrack and work things in later on. But that typically is the method that works for me. It's like a little bit of planning, and then, but not being too rigid with it.
Okay. Are with book two, are we having the same 2 point of views?
There's going to be 3 points of view.
Okay.
So it will be Django and Mika again, and then there'll be a third point of view.
Okay. That's exciting. I will say,
Yes.
I'm excited for a longer book in book two, because book one, it was very fun and I thoroughly loved it, but I was wanting more. Like it
Right.
ended and I was like, I want this to be like 12 books. Like I want to just be doing this. Like I don't want to put it
Right.
down. Let's go. So I'm all for a longer second book.
Wonderful. Yeah, and I think it definitely, there's enough of a universe there to lend itself to a longer book. So, I mean, the first book is kind of an appetizer to the rest of the series, I think.
Yeah.
The plan, like I said, the plan right now is for a trilogy. This story will be wrapped up in 3 books. There's always potential that, yeah, I mean, there's more happening in the universe,
Yeah.
but this story will be complete in 3.
Okay.
It
Nice.
might be a longer 3 than I had thought, but it'll be 3.
Awesome. Was
Yeah.
there was there any particular scene, whether it's from Eclipse or the second book in the series, that was really not the easiest scene to write, or that you had a difficult time with?
I always struggle with the beginning of a book, whether that's, when you first get the word on the page is one thing, but coming up with a scene that really is engaging and also makes sense to the rest of that really draws you into the book. I've always struggled with that. So I'll usually go through 2 or 3 iterations of the first chapter before the final one comes out. But that's just something I've learned as part of my process at this point.
The beginning is always difficult to like, and then knowing where to start and how you want to start the book, I think is very interesting too, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of ways you can start a book and introduce characters.
Yeah, I think, with this one, I really wanted to get into the action pretty quick, and I think I achieved that with this one.
Yeah.
Um, part of that was part of my reasoning of adding the prologue as well, because I didn't want to start on the station with Django because it's a little bit more of a slower build into that story, not really that much, but I really wanted to set the tone of it being a fast-paced story. So the prologue really, I feel, helped with that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Do you have a favorite do you have a favorite scene or character from the series so far?
I don't know about a scene necessarily, but if I thought about it, I could probably come up with something. But my favorite character is Abigail. She was a lot of fun to write. She came to me right away and really just, this female Jack Sparrow space pirate type of character. Um, so I guess for people who haven't read the book yet, yeah, Abigail is a secondary character, but she is a space pirate. She's an active space pirate, and we meet her in the prologue. And she becomes entangled in Mika's story pretty quickly. But she was super fun to write. Just that, and this character that you're not 100% sure of her intentions, what she's really after, and she's just kind of a loose cannon. And she was a lot of fun.
Yeah, she is definitely a little bit of a loose cannon. I love it. I really love the way it came together without trying to spoil anything. Towards the
Yeah.
end, how you kind of see what was going on, what the prologue was going for, and like where that was headed. I think that was very I did not quite expect it, so it was really nice. It
Mm.
was very yeah, there were a lot of reveals that happened at the end where I was like, okay, why isn't book out? I need book two. Book one's not even out yet, but give me book two.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's always, I mean, it's a good thing to hear as an author, because I mean, so many of my early reviews have said that. I was like, I'm ready for book 2. Like my wife, she's like, where's book 2? I'm like, I'm still writing it.
You're like, I might be halfway done, but I'm not sure yet.
Yeah. Yeah, so, and that's good. The plan was to, release this series pretty quickly. That was the reason for, the 100,000 words. That was kind of my in my head, where book 2 and book 3 were both going to be about that 100,000 word mark. Um, so the plan is still to get the trilogy out this year. But we're looking at late summer for book 2 instead of early summer kind of thing. And it might be more, late fall for book 3, but I'll do what I can, because the books have just doubled in size from the original plan.
That's awesome. Well, I do think writing and coming out with 3 books in a year is a huge achievement. So it's
Thanks. And I'm slower than most, or not, I shouldn't say than most, but than a lot of authors at least. So, but this isn't writing isn't my full-time career just yet. So we're still, still constrained to early hours and weekends kind of thing. So
do you have like a specific source or like something that really pushed you into wanting to become an author or start writing in general?
it's something I always enjoyed as a kid, writing. Like I remember being in like grade 2 and writing stories and, really liking it. So, and I just love reading ever since I can remember. So, I've always loved story, and I mean, I have a Bachelor of Arts degree in English. Like have loved it. As yeah, it's always been a part of who I am. Um, what pushed me to sci-fi fantasy, like, I mean, I kind of grew up on Star Trek: The Next Generation. I used to watch that with my dad. That was always, I love that show. I still do. And then fantasy later on, was lent the sort of genre by Terry Brooks, and kind of got brought into the fantasy realm that way. And then, shortly after, started reading Wheel of Time. And so that kind of led me, sci-fi fantasy. That's pretty much what I exclusively read at this point. Um, so yeah, I guess long story short, yeah, writing's always been, just a part of who I am. I procrastinated later on in life because, I mean, various reasons. You get busy, you think it's not a viable career path, and it's just you get, other things come up. So um, when I started to get back, look at seriously writing that story, as the Guardians tell, is when I really first started to discover about self-publishing, and that it's a viable path now. Back 10 years ago when I was thinking of starting at that point, it wasn't really as viable as it is now. It's back in the day where you had to print 1,000 books and keep them in your garage and hope to sell them. Where ebooks have really transformed that market now. So it's been really that's really what has spurned on my ability to, or maybe not ability, but the spurred me on to continue writing into, there's a path I can do this with, and not have to go through the agent process and querying and all that. So
Yeah. I think
yeah,
especially recently it's become more and more popular to not necessarily popular. I think that's a bad choice of words, but more and more um it is an option. Whereas before, like,
yeah,
it was kind of like, and I think to what you were saying, like it was more difficult to self-publish, but it was also looked down upon in the industry.
yes,
It was
yeah,
like, oh, you're self-published, you're not traditionally, but you don't have an publishing house behind you, and it wasn't kind of looked at the same level,
right.
and which is not great. It's not good.
No,
So I think the industry as a whole has come quite a bit of a long way from there, where it's now not only is it acceptable, but it's welcomed and it's pushed for and it's
yeah,
talked about a lot more. And I think especially with the rise of book talk, and I think like booktube and bookstagram probably have quite a bit to do with it as well. But
yeah,
I feel like for me, because I'm mostly active on book talk, that's where I see most of, I feel like book talk really pushes independently published authors a lot.
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. I feel that way as well. Even though I haven't quite hit my stride on on TikTok yet, but definitely, I mean, you definitely see a lot more independently published authors there.
Yeah, it's a fun community. I think it's also very random, like with because you're saying that you haven't hit your stride. It's so the algorithm is just it is.
It is. It's
I
insane,
mean,
isn't it?
I will have a video get like 15,000 views, and then the next five videos will have like 150. It
Right.
makes
Yeah.
no sense, and it's like I have a decent following to where like you would think that you'd at least be getting at least 1,000 views a video, and
Right.
now
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. It
it's
really is. Does seem to be an element of randomness to it for sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
I think I mean, I think 3,000 is about where I've hit for views on TikTok, and yeah, other than that, it's 300, and that's okay. Like, I mean, I have
yeah,
fun with it. So, but it's it definitely is like, okay, I don't know how to get more. I'm not sure why I'm not hitting more views. I'm doing what everyone else is doing, but you know, it is what it is. It's a lot of fun. So
yeah, that's how I look at it. I'm like, if I'm having fun, it's worth it. And so, like,
exactly, yeah,
towards the end of last year, I took a couple months off because I wasn't having as much fun with it anymore. And I noticed too, like, if I focus on the views, it's not as fun. But if I ignore that,
yeah,
it's a lot of fun. And it's like, I try to,
definitely.
like, if I get over 500 views, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, I made it. It's like, you get excited.
Yeah.
So, but it's I think there was one video I saw, oh, what was it? It was a few months ago, and it was kind of saying how like if you really think about the views and you might get discouraged, like if you look at other people's views and you look at your own and you're like, oh, it only got 500 views. And the person was like, now imagine someone coming into your bedroom, 500 people walking through your bedroom within an hour. That's a lot
Yeah,
of people.
absolutely.
So it's like
Absolutely. And yeah,
500 is a lot.
it's true. It's true. Yeah, and no other, I mean, no other real life scenario would do you have an opportunity to stand up in front of 500 people and tell them, about the book you just read, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. With reading other books, do you have a favorite book?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough, that's a tough one. If I was pushed to pick a favorite book right now, at least right now, I would say, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V. Schwab is probably one of my favorites. um, I do lean a little bit more towards fantasy in my reading, at least.
Oh,
But that book, um, I don't know. There's something about that book that spoke to me on a level that other books don't. It's like this character I get, like I just totally got immersed in that world and with that entire concept, and I just absolutely loved it. Um, Other favorite books, like I really like Red Rising. I mean, that's been a big inspiration for a lot of my writing. And what else? I don't know. There's so much out there.
it's
Those are two that I really like. Yeah.
that's cool. I know it's like one of the hardest questions to ask someone who enjoys reading.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
if you like reading fantasy more, have you considered writing a fantasy book, or do you want to plan to just stick with science fiction?
Um, I have a fantasy book that I'm working on. Not I've actually started on that before I moved into Eclipse, and then I kind of got caught up with Eclipse, and I was like, no, I need to finish a series or two here before I start something else. So once Eclipse is done, and once Lies of the Guardians is done, then my next planned series is a fantasy series. So
Nice.
yeah, and I am really looking forward to that. And it's one of those things where like I wish I could write faster so I could get these books written.
That's
But
awesome.
yeah, so yeah, 2024, I'm hoping to have at least one fantasy book out by then.
Do you know what kind of fantasy it's going to be?
It's going to be it'll be technically epic fantasy, but it's gonna be like there'll be vampires involved. So it's going to be a little bit different, but I do have an idea. um I don't want to go too much into it at this point, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of like vampires but in like an epic fantasy setting. um yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest things because like the subgenres of every genre, but science fiction especially is very interesting because there's a
Yeah.
lot of overlap. And so if you if you could choose like exactly which subgenre, even if it's not like a technical subgenre, which subgenre would you put Eclipse into?
um yeah, like I've been calling it a space adventure. It is, it's a bit of space opera, a bit of dystopian. It's not really neatly fit into either of those categories, but it is a fast-paced, science fiction action adventure story.
Nice.
It's space opera in that there's spaceships, there's space pirates, there's space colonies and whatnot going on, but everything in Eclipse at least takes place in Earth's orbit. So we're not seeing other planets. We're not, we see a bit of, colonies on the moon a little bit. We get, just a first, kind of glimpse of that. Um, but there's no faster than light travel. There's no aliens, so it's not your traditional space opera, Star Trek type of thing. It's comparable. That's what, I kind of compare it to the, like at least early Expanse where, we're still in our solar system. We're not traveling faster than light. Red Rising takes place all in our solar system as well. So that's a little bit more fantasy than what Eclipse is, but it kind of, um, those are kind of the comparables of the environment at least that it's in. So um And so yeah, so and those two, and then yeah, there's definitely heavy dystopian elements in it, but it's not your typical yeah, Red Rising would be probably the closest comparison when it comes to that. Dystopian set in space, maybe elements of the 100 a little bit, but yeah. So it's a little, it does fit in that realm of in that flow, but it's not, we're not going to other, solar systems and finding aliens at this point. So
Yeah. I think so what I'm gathering is book 2, we might get to see more outside of Earth's orbit.
yes and no.
You're like, "What can I say without giving spoilers?"
Yeah, well, we'll see a little bit. We definitely learn a little bit more about it. We don't stray too far though in book
Okay.
two. Yeah,
Well, I absolutely cannot wait for book 2 to come out, but in the meantime, where can people find book 1?
it'll be in Kindle Unlimited, and paperback and hardcover copies are available at most bookstores. So check it out.
Do you think this will ever be an audiobook?
Yes, the plan is for it to be an audiobook. It was supposed to be out around the time of release.
Okay.
But my narrator had kind of had some personal issues, so we just couldn't get it out on time. So I'm not sure when it's going to come out, but it will. The plan is for it to be out this year at least. So yeah, it is in the works. It'll be my first audiobook,
Oh, that's
so I'm excited about it.
awesome. Well, thank you for joining today and, like, hopping
Yeah,
on.
absolutely.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
was
thank you so much for having me. It's I've like I mentioned, like I've been following you on TikTok for a while and really have enjoyed enjoyed your content. So I appreciate you taking the time to read Eclipse and for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to anyone and everyone who watched and listened to this episode. It was so much fun interviewing Herman, but it was even funner reading Eclipse. If you have not bought yourself a copy, I cannot recommend this book enough. If you want to support me, you can go to my affiliate link on bookshop.org and purchase this book. Otherwise, you can buy it wherever books are sold. Don't forget to tune back in next week for yet another episode of Joshua Space.